I was brought up to keep secrets, ugly secrets, about bullying, coercion, and fear, which were all part of everyday life in my family. I was taught that it was shameful to discuss things with outsiders, and that if I did, I'd be compromising my family's honor, the most important thing in my mother's life. And that's why I didn't tell anyone when she showed me a photograph of the man she said I had to marry. At 16, I knew it was wrong. I knew I was too young to get married or to leave school. And it felt wrong being forced to marry a man that I didn't know, but I didn't tell. I kept that secret. At 16, I ran away rather than going through with that marriage, and my family disowned me. "You've shamed us. You're dead in our eyes," my mother said. And I kept that secret too. As I tried to make my way in life, I kept my head down and my eyes averted because I didn't want people knowing how worthless I was. How does that make you feel? Hands up, anyone? Shocked? Anyone else? I can't hear you, so Jenny. Pitiful, yeah. Shock, pity, horror, all of those emotions I felt when I read the opening paragraph of Jasvinder Sanghera's Daughters of Shame. So that wasn't my story. That was the opening paragraph of the book that changed my life. At 14, my best friend, Salaha Zahid, gave me this book, and she thought it would be informative. It was a birthday gift. She had no idea she was about to change the course of my life forever. Because I read that book, I got on the bus intending to get off 2 stops later, and I ended up at the end of the line in God knows where, with tears streaming down my face because I was gripped by these stories at 14. And it hurt my heart so badly, I knew I had to act, because these were things that I knew that were prevalent in the culture, or rather the countries that I come from, in Iran and Pakistan. And I hadn't realized that it was also prevalent in the UK too. So with that pain and knowing all of these stories of men and women who had suffered instances of honor-based violence, forced marriage, and later female genital mutilation, I went to my school friends. And just like you perhaps might do now as students, I took the book to them and I said, "Have you heard of this?" And through our conversations with teachers and students, we decided that as school children, we could actually do something about this. So I contacted Jasvinder Sanghera, the author of the book, whose story it was. She actually did survive a forced marriage at 16. And Jasvinder had set up a charity called Karma Nirvana, and Karma Nirvana had a helpline. So if you were in a situation like a forced marriage or an instance of honor abuse, you could give them a call. So I picked up the phone, I called the helpline, and I said, "I'd like to speak to Jasvinder." And so eventually I managed to get through to her. I spoke to her about my project and what I wanted to do, and she was very supportive. She said, "Just let us know how we can support, and we're happy to work with you." So off I went with my friends, and we wrote a proposal of a charity dinner, something that we could do as students at our school to not just raise funds for the charity, but to also raise awareness. And when I took the proposal to my head teacher, I'll never forget, her name was Miss McFarland, she said, "Arifa, this is a fantastic idea, but unfortunately, I'm leaving the school at the end of the year and I can't approve this for next year. Wait until the next head comes in." So I thought, okay, that's not too bad. She's not saying no, she's just saying wait a little bit longer. So I did. The next year, we had an interim head teacher who was a male. And when I took my proposal to him, he took a look at me, he took a look at the proposal and went, "Arifa, you're in GCSE year. Are you sure that you can take on a project this big and do your exams? Wouldn't it be better if you did an assembly?" How do you think that made me feel? There's a P word that I'm looking for. It's not a rude word, but there is a P word. Patronised. I felt entirely patronised because I knew I could do it. I knew what my driving force was because that pain in my heart was not going away, and he was telling me I couldn't. So I waited. I thought, you're only going to be here for a year. Next year, we're going to get a new head teacher. So that time I was 15. The following year, it was final year at the school. GCSE year, I was 16 years old, and we had a new head teacher, and this time it was a female. And by this point, I was fed up with the idea of one person approving or disapproving my project. So I called for a meeting with the entire senior leadership team. I said, I want all of you there. You can all hear my proposal. And so they marched into the office one by one, rank and file. I sat down. I presented what I wanted to achieve, where we were going to get the funding from, what the purpose of the evening was. And again, they sat back and said, how are you going to do this and your exams at the same time? And by then, even at 16, I'd had enough. I said, with all due respect, none of you care more about my grades than I do. For you, it's a statistic. For me, it will determine my life. If I didn't think I could do this, I wouldn't be sitting here in front of you today. And there was silence. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Thank you very much, we'll let you know. The very next day, I got an email saying, your project has been approved. Good luck. Now, whether that good luck was sarcastic, I will not know, ever. But what I can tell you is that we put together the best event that school has seen in over 100 years. I used to get in at 8 o'clock in the morning for the school day and then leave at 8 p.m. in the evening. So at 3 o'clock, once the school day had finished, there was one teacher who never stopped believing in me. And Mr. Straker made space in his office for me to let me use his computer and his phone. Everybody knew if you wanted to find Arifa, you'd go to Mr. Straker's office. And out of that base, we would cold call businesses asking for sponsorship. We sourced tables and linen and centerpieces and a 3-course meal, auction prizes, raffle prizes. One of my friends, again a GCSE student, wrote a play on forced marriage and worked with Year 9 students to enact it on the evening. Another one of my friends, who was a contemporary dancer, incredible enough to be working at Sadler's Wells, now later on in her career, she choreographed a contemporary dance around the issue of forced marriage, and that was also performed. On the evening, Jasvinder herself came down to give a keynote speech, and Baroness Patricia Scotland, and she was the former Attorney General, so she was able to break down the fact that if you take somebody abroad for the purposes of forcing them to marry, that's also kidnap. Now, if they haven't consented to the relationship, they're unlikely to consent to any sex within that relationship, so that becomes marital rape. So these very abstract concepts like forced marriage or things that people might not necessarily understand, she was able to break it down into crimes that we are familiar with. Even if you don't necessarily understand honor and the taboo around sort of breaking the honor code, you will understand kidnap, you will understand rape, you will understand all of the other forms of domestic violence that honor abuse encompasses. So the evening came, we had 120 guests. It was sort of counselors, teachers, members of the local community, students as well. Not only did we raise £5,000 for Karma Nirvana, the charity, I left that school with 7 A stars and 6 A's. So I showed that second teacher that I could do it, but that wasn't my driving force. It wasn't I need to prove him wrong. The driving force was that book that I began with. I kept that book on my bedside table for 9 months while I was going through this project, because every time I felt like I was being knocked down, I knew the only thing that would help me get back up is remembering why I did this to begin with. Now, if I fast forward my journey and skip all the bits in the middle, we went from finishing that project to joining a couple of organisations like Plan UK, Youth for Change. Eventually, I was chosen to be the first UK youth delegate to the United Nations. So I was at the UN when the Sustainable Development Goals were signed and rubber stamped and sort of introduced to world leaders, and had this incredible journey of speaking in front of sort of world leaders on massive platforms. But when I came back home from New York, I realized that the most important thing is always grassroots work. It's talking to people. It's actually being the change that you want to see. The UN and the Sustainable Development Goals are a fantastic framework to work under, but the UN does not do the job. They can't set up programs in every country. It's down to us, the people, to actually take that initiative to be that change. So I came home, I set up Educate to Eradicate so that we could work on the grassroots on forced marriage, FGM, and honour abuse. I used to train teachers, doctors, police officers, midwives on how to spot the signs of abuse. But in all of that sort of journey, I wouldn't be standing here in front of you today had I not been surrounded by people who kept me going. And the resilience that I want to sort of convey to you today is not something that I built myself. It's something that you can draw from the people around you. And for you, I would say that your cause is not necessarily going to be forced marriage, FGM, and honor abuse, but there is a battlefield of causes out there. There is so much that is wrong with our world. Our world is hurting, and you know it. Every one of you has a gift, a talent, something that you can contribute. You are not born in this century, in this country, rather living in this country, in this castle for no reason. There is a purpose. Neglect not the gift that is in you. Find it, utilize it to make a difference in the world, and know that when you work with purity of intent and you pick a spot on that battlefield of causes, people will come and join you. They will see the purity of what you're trying to achieve, and they will support you, so you will never be alone. But if you fall into this idea of, and it's very easy to do, of ego, and I want to be on the 30 under 30 on Forbes, and you've got these milestones that you want to hit, you'll find that your journey becomes incredibly unsustainable. That is why it's so important to have that linchpin, that moment that hurts your heart so much, it moves you to act. And for you to always circle back to that, always remember what is driving you, use it as your fuel. Because I'm going to end with a Tony Benn quote, which is, you must always have two flames burning in the human heart. The flame of anger against injustice in the world, and the flame of hope that we can build a better tomorrow together.